Melania snubbing Jill Biden during the Trump transition. She was invited to come sit down with the Biden family, the same Biden family that orchestrated the raid on her house in Mar-a-Lago and led FBI agents into her and her son's bedrooms. Yeah, Melania's probably not that interested in hanging out with the Bidens and the Harrises. And so she's not going to go. Good for her. Melania snubs Jill Biden. First Lady makes a revealing first move. She's skipping the traditional White House meeting. Whoa! Melania is not going to be joining President Trump at the White House on Wednesday this week, despite getting an invitation from Joe and Jill. Now, traditionally, the outgoing president hosts the incoming president, which is a strange thing because Joe just got done telling us that Trump was a threat to American democracy. Now he's going to invite him in for a cup of tea and a transition conversation. He's going to host him. First Lady usually hosts her successor for tea in the residence. Oh, actually, they actually do have tea. I just made that up. But yeah, Melania doesn't want to go have tea with the people who orchestrated the raid against her family. Michelle Obama hosted Melania Trump because Michelle Obama didn't raid her for tea in the Yellow Room back during 2016. None of that happened in 2020 because they stole that election. Melania and Jill have yet to speak, man, in the aftermath of Kamala's humiliating defeat, even though their husbands, Joe and Trump, have had a phone call. They said, a source with knowledge said, Mrs. Trump is not going, and they have not spoken. Why? Why would they be cordial? She sent FBI goons into her house. The last time that Jill Biden and Melania would have seen each other would have been at the Rosalind Carter funeral in November of last year. All first ladies were there. Numerous reports that Melania intends to be a part-time first lady for her second term, may not even live full-time in the White House. She's yet to announce an agenda or staff any hires. 4 years ago, Trump snubbed Joe Biden after Biden so-called defeated him. And Biden now has promised a peaceful and orderly transition. The Bidens are going to attend Trump's inauguration because they hate Kamala. We'll see if Kamala shows up or not. The Bidens extended congratulations and a joint invite to the Trumps. They're going to meet in the Oval Office on Wednesday. Dictator Trump allowed back into the White House. Remember when they said, he's never going to step foot in here again? Oops. Traditionally, the outgoing president welcomes the incoming one. Trump rode with then President Barack Obama to his own inauguration. But then in 2020, Trump skipped it because it was rigged. And then they orchestrated January 6th against him. So Biden simply went to the Capitol from the hotel where he was staying, didn't go to the White House. And so they've not been back to the White House since they left last time. Oh, it's going to be fun. But Melania will not be there on Wednesday. Melania is working on a transition, showing some signs of building up an East Wing. John Rogers, a top executive with Goldman Sachs and the White House Historical Association Board, will help Melania staff up the East Wing. Rogers helped Melania with the first term. He's been involved in a lot of politics since Reagan, but it's still unclear how active she'll be or where she'll live or what she's doing. Her son, Barron, is attending New York University, right? So maybe she'll spend some more time up there with him. Her memoir is a New York Times bestseller. She was not deeply involved in the campaign. She went to the RNC, didn't speak, did attend one rally. And she did a couple interviews as the election was coming to a close, right? She was doing some book stuff. Her absence during the Trump many legal cases was notable. And of course, her son was still in grade school the first term, and that's not happening now. So we've got questions about the transition. A report says Marco Rubio is going to be the Secretary of State, which is an interesting pick. Says the president appears to have settled on him. It's just a New York Times report and has not been confirmed by Trump as of yet. Trump has confirmed other officially on Truth, as we saw previously. Trump did pick Chairwoman Elise Stefanik to go over to the UN. And so this was his official statement on that. So until we see one of these, it's just the New York Times reporting. But Rubio would make sense, and I can understand that. So I don't think we've seen anything official from Trump on that. In fact, let's take a look at what he's posted, see if anything just came out fresh out of the oven. And the answer is no. Last thing is a video about 13 hours ago. So he has confirmed that. He's also confirmed Lee Zeldin will serve as the EPA. Says Lee has a strong background. He's going to ensure fair, swift regulatory decisions. Says I've known Lee Zeldin for a long time. I've watched him handle brilliant, complex situations. Was a congressman in New York, performed well, also deployed to Iraq, Operation Iraqi Freedom, was then elected to the Senate, currently lives in New York. So he'll be there over the EPA. But the other rumors are, it's Rubio! It's Rubio. The president-elect appears to have settled on it's Rubio. 3 people familiar with his thinking said. Trump could still change his mind at the last minute, which he might do. It appeared to have settled on Rubio. Rubio was elected to the Senate, staked out his positions as a foreign policy hawk, hard lines on China, Iran, Venezuela, and Cuba. And he does have a little neocon-y vibe to him, which is not anything that we like. However, I will say this, that Trump has himself said he brought on morons like John Bolton to just scare the other side. He said this multiple times. He said it when he was here in Phoenix. I went to that rally. He said, it's great to have John Bolton around because you have that big mustache back there. Everybody's freaked out. I just put him back there. Everybody looks at him. He says, I brought him over to North Korea with me. He was just standing there. Everybody's petrified. So he uses them as a tool. He says, and I think he also said on the Joe Rogan show, he says that he wants to bomb every country that exists. Or maybe Tucker said that. Somebody said that. Bolton wants to bomb every single country in the world. Why? Because we have the bombs and we need to make them. So it's nice to have somebody like that, said Trump. Now, the other story that makes me less worried about Trump and his cabinet picks is a story that RFK Jr. told this past weekend at the Genius Network. And I'd encourage you to check out that interview. It's on the Joe Polish show, Joe Polish's YouTube channel. And in that conversation, RFK Jr. was talking about his father, JFK, who was in a cabinet meeting talking about how to respond during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And one option was, rather than the blockade, as we learned about, they could have bombed a bunch of facilities down there, killed a bunch of people, probably would have started a war. And so the story goes that RFK was in there with his cabinet and he was taking a vote of the cabinets. He was saying, okay, who wants to bomb? And it was like 12-1. Let's bomb it versus not bomb it. 12 bombs, no bombs. He's, oh, crap. So they debate it, comes back. It's 8 want to bomb it, 6 don't want to bomb it. Afterwards, after hours of debate, and finally, and Kennedy's on the don't bomb it side. And finally, after all the debate, it's still 8-6 bomb. It's totally in favor of bombing. Kennedy says, the only vote that really matters here is mine. Thanks for the debate. Thanks for playing. But I'm going to make the decision. It's blockade. So go do the blockade. And RFK Jr. was explaining that story as a parallel to what he has observed with President Trump, that Trump operates in the same manner, which is why RFK Jr. thinks he's a strong leader. That was the moral of the story. I can see that happening and playing out here, saying he initially found himself at odds with those Republicans who were more skeptical about interventions abroad. But he also echoed Mr. Trump more recently on issues like Russia, saying we got to bring these things to a conclusion. Despite speaking in hardline terms about Russia in the past, Rubio would likely go along with Trump's plan to press Ukraine to find a way to come to a settlement. Right? Unclear whether the leaders of Ukraine or Russia would be prepared to enter talks. Now, Mr. Rubio has been among the most outspoken senators on the need for the United States to be more aggressive on China. And I was also at another event this past week with Casey Fleming. You know him as the head of Black Ops Partners. And he gave a talk. I was there with an organization called the Positive Network. Shout out to Mike Voltz. And Casey Flemings, was saying that China is by far the biggest threat in the whole world, saying they're basically eating our lunch in many ways. We're in a hot war is the takeaway of his story. He has adopted positions that later become more in both parties. For example, while serving in Congress during the first Trump administration, he began advocating industrial policy meant to help the United States better compete with China's state-directed economy. Mr. Rubio also served as co-chairman of the Bipartisan Congressional Executive Commission on China, which is aimed to craft aggressive policy on China. And in 2020, Rubio sponsored a bill that tried to prevent the import of Chinese goods that were used with slave labor, which is actually a good thing. Why are we allowing our industries to be gutted by foreign companies that are undermining our cost and expense demands using slave labor, which is immoral? President Biden signed it into law the next year. In 2019, Mr. Rubio, that's good, I'm glad that was signed. Mr. Rubio helped persuade Mr. Trump to also adopt harsh authorities sanctions against Venezuela and Nicolas Maduro. And so we'll see what Rubio does. I think Rubio's actually a fairly competent person. He had that one debate flub where he just had a short circuit in the brain. But he usually, I think, can represent an image fairly well, right? And if you put up Rubio versus Blinken, for example, one person has a higher air of competency than the other, clearly. And in other words, I don't think Rubio is going to be out like a little weenie out when he's standing there in a room with the Chinese people. Remember Blinken? He's sitting there. The Chinese are like, "Don't you lecture us about the Uyghurs while you have Black Lives Matter burning down your cities." And Blinken was like, "Don't yell at me." Okay, I don't think Rubio is going to take that crap. So a spokesman for Rubio, although even though the Chinese had a good point, yeah, I'm going to say, what are you lecturing them for? Your people are burning down your own streets, claiming racism, and basically like they're living in a continual state of servitude or something in America. Why don't you go deal with that? All right, so that's happening.